Ukrainian troops are fighting hard to regain territory along the front lines in the country's south. They've been struggling to push through Russian-occupied areas that are littered with landmines. But the Ukrainian military is dismissing reports it has stepped up its counteroffensive. Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin and 17 African leaders are meeting in St. Petersburg again today. The African nations are urging Putin to follow their peace plan to end the war, and they also expressed concerns about the consequences of Russia's grain deal with Ukraine collapsing. The Russian president said Moscow is looking carefully into a peace proposal. Deborah Pata is reporting on the meetings for us from Johannesburg. Deborah, it's good to see you. Vladimir Putin sort of characterized the grain deal as something that was working out in Ukraine's favor, but not working out for Russia, and that's why they pulled out. But sort of a bit of a concession, Russia offered free grain to 6 African nations. Can we talk a little bit about which 6 were offered this deal and why, and how the other nations sort of received it?
Well, it's been treated with a great deal of skepticism, as many countries would prefer that the grain deal was actually reinstated. Russia's decision last week to pull out of the deal and then bomb Ukrainian ports, destroying thousands of tons of food, has enraged countries like Kenya, which lambasted the decision in no uncertain terms as a stab in the back. And analysts have told us that this has strained Russian relations with countries where food security is often a matter of life and death. Think of Somalia, which will be one of the recipients of free grain, which, despite sparse rains earlier this year bringing some relief, is still in the grip of its worst drought in 4 decades and relies heavily on grain imported from Ukraine. And when we visited there last year, children were actually dying of hunger in front of us. It was a devastating situation. Not only is imported grain affected, but it also means food prices will increase dramatically as the UN brokered grain deal, which basically allowed safe passage in Ukraine through the Black Sea, did help bring down spiraling food costs by more than 20%. And this will also impact other countries affected by the drought, like northern Kenya, South Sudan, and Ethiopia. Kenya is not on that list of getting free grain. One analyst told us that Putin's announcement that they would provide free grain to some countries was really just a cynical move, and at best only made to stem criticism of Russia's withdrawal from the grain deal by African leaders.
So let's talk about this summit. I mean, how successful is it so far? We led in by saying only 17 nations. Yeah, only 17 leaders were there. There are delegations as well, but only 17 leaders. That is a far cry from the attendance record for the last time Russia held a summit like this.
Well, frankly, it's been underwhelming. As you say, just 17 African heads of state, according to Russia's own tally, showed up for the summit. That's less than half of the 43 leaders who participated in the very first one in 2019. And the list of notable absentees includes some very heavy hitters: Nigeria, Kenya, Democratic Republic of Congo, Rwanda, Zambia. I think Putin has seriously miscalculated the mood of this continent, not only regarding the collapse of the grain deal, but also last month, South Africa's Cyril Ramaphosa led an African peace mission to the capitals of both Ukraine and Russia in a bid to find a solution to the war. And analysts I've spoken to all say that this was treated with disdain and disrespect by Putin. Instead, Putin bombed Ukraine during their meeting with President Volodymyr Zelensky, and rather humiliating, I think, for those African leaders. And in Russia, Putin didn't even bother to listen to the delegation before interrupting to imply that basically there was no point in discussing anything, as they didn't understand and should just go home. Now, Ramaphosa wants to revive those peace talks at the summit. At least this time, Putin said he will consider their proposals. Whether that actually amounts to anything remains to be seen. And then there's trade. Russia's 2019 pledge to double trade with African nations to $40 billion has so far fallen flat, with a total trade amounting to around $18 billion since then. So it's not looking too successful so far.
I'd say so. There are a number of African nations sort of abstained from condemning Russia for its invasion of Ukraine. But you wonder, with that sort of treatment, whether the sentiment will shift, particularly because the U.S. has been, staging some significant outreach to African nations. Deborah, really interesting. Thank you.